Our speaker tonight is Seth Carstens of FanSided. Seth's a good friend of mine, but I won't botch your introduction. I'll just read it because I'm sure I'll miss something here. Seth's been developing WordPress since 2004, considered himself a WordPress evangelist because there's nothing that WordPress can't do as a CMS at any scale when architected the right way. Seth now manages a group of WordPress developers, teaching them WordPress, object-oriented programming, and as they earn their way towards developer rock stardom. Yes, rock star. He spends most of his time teaching, planning, and architecting solutions for WordPress for FanSided, which was recently acquired by and is now a leading digital brand of Time. Also, don't say we didn't warn you, he's both opinionated and sarcastic, often in the same breath. So without further ado, Seth Carstens.
Thanks, Tom. And the computer turned itself off. Thanks, Mike. So how many of you here have used custom post types before? Almost everyone? Cool. I'm going to talk to you about custom post types from kind of a developer point of view. If you haven't or don't know much about object-oriented programming, you're going to learn a little bit of that tonight. You're also going to learn what a post type is. So I started real basic, just to make sure that we kind of bring everyone into the same playing field. My slides are available online. This is prezi.com. It's the same thing I used for my WordCamp presentation. Actually, I think it's HTML5 or Flash, depending on what computer you have. And hopefully it doesn't make you seasick as I move through the slides. See what I mean? So let's talk about the anatomy of a post. A post is just a row in the database, right? So the database, there's a schema and there's columns and rows, kind of like a spreadsheet. And your post sits just kind of inside of that structure. The second thing that you need to know about a post is that there is unlimited amounts of relational data stored in another table called post meta. So let's take a deeper look at that. This is the WordPress database diagram. I'm sure you can't see anything on there. It wasn't intended for you to read the diagram. But just so that you can kind of see like that, all of those are separate tables that represent your database install of WordPress. Let's look at a couple in particular. This is the post table. You can almost read that maybe. So in a database diagram, you can kind of see other related things that are connected. But more importantly, you can see some of the stuff that we store about our posts. I don't know if you know about the WordPress origin, but WordPress wasn't intended to be a CMS. Right? It was intended to be a blogging engine. So everything in a blog is a post. Recent debate, they're talking about converting this into a content table because that's all it really is, right? Like you have a title, you have some content that you want to represent on the page, and then maybe a relationship between that and something else. And so I think to avoid confusion, they've just continued calling them posts, but it's really just a piece of content. It doesn't matter what kind of content it is. You can store anything in the database. Some more notable things is that we have excerpts that are stored in this table, status, and some other things you can actually search through. We're going to talk a little bit about post performance and why the other developers of other CMS platforms kind of like rag on us because WordPress is, and I quote, the slowest CMS, and we'll kind of talk about why that is. So I just wanted to show this view of the database so you could see that there are relationships between the content that we're creating and these other tables. The most important one related to posts is post meta. And what post meta does is it allows you to infinitely, and I have an asterisk next to infinite, and I'm going to bag on GoDaddy here for a second since you're here. and Bluehost isn't. So I'll just say it to your face. Your unlimited plan is kind of limited. So in the same fashion, we have unlimited amounts of related information that we can connect to the posts. And that all lives in this one table in these 4 fields. So you can imagine, even if you don't know anything about databases, this is probably not a good way to organize your information and then retrieve it back out. Like, how can you really, with 4 fields, make an infinitely expandable database? It's not going to work very well. It functions just fine for a local restaurant that has a menu, and maybe each of their posts needs like a calorie count, right? We could add a calorie count where our meta key would be calories, and then the value would be 230. That would be one example of using something in the WP Post meta table to extend your posts. It does not, however, search very well. Raise your hand if you love WordPress search. Yeah, I didn't think I'd see anyone. Well, that's because of the way our database schema is set up. Search kind of sucks. Nobody vomited, so must be okay. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is, so that was posts, the anatomy of a post, is taxonomies. How many of you know what a taxonomy is? Most of you. Oh, that's good. I struggled with this slide because explaining what a taxonomy is not easy. There's probably are going to laugh at me after I explain it, but my definition of a taxonomy is a method of organization, a classification, a type of something, or a means of grouping things together. That is not Webster's definition, it's mine. I did look up, though, and Wikipedia had a pretty good line in their Wikipedia article about taxonomies, and you can think about it as a is a or has a relationship. So when you're connecting things with a taxonomy, this is a post, or this is a category, and so those are how we group things together. Let's see if so can anyone tell me, is this a taxonomy? Yes, no, everyone's afraid to answer. Chris was saying no. This is not a taxonomy. So this is a set of attributes. Sure. Question.
It is magic, though.
It is magic.
That's all.
So the answer was no. This is an attribute model. So this is a unicorn, and the unicorn has these attributes. So this would be more like custom fields, right? Or the post meta that we went over. So the unicorn has stars. Like, how many stars does it has? Well, that would be in the value. How much happiness does it have? I don't know. Where does happiness go to? It's rib section. Good thing. Let's move on. Does this look like a taxonomy? Yeah. Everyone shake your head. Yes. Yes. This is a taxonomy, right? Because I'm not even going to try and say any of these words. But this dinosaur. This is a dinosaur, so is a relationship, right? But it's a certain kind of dinosaur that's grouped. So that's the taxonomy model. So back to the WordPress table, where do taxonomies live? This, by the way, came straight from the WordPress codex, so if you want to take a deeper look at any of those things, you can go to the codex, or you can go to my presentation slides and like zoom into any of these tables. So this is the taxonomy table, and it's actually connected to 2 other related tables that help us create and organize taxonomies. Here you can see these are pretty simple. You have the name of the taxonomy, a description, whether the taxonomy is related to another taxonomy or not, which is parent, and then count. So count is for how many things live in this taxonomy. So like how many kinds of this dinosaur are there, for example. And that is purely performance based, so that the database doesn't have to count it every single time you load a page, right? Because if you have 20 types of dinosaurs and then you reload your home page, and then it has to count how many dinosaurs are in each of your categories every time you load it. If you thought you were complaining before about performance, you'd really have a tough time. So when you drag that default categories widget into your sidebar and you say, yes, tell me how many posts are in each of these categories, it's just pulling the number from right here. So this is the terms table, which is related to the taxonomy table. A few different things here. You have order, group. I guess before I continue, are there any questions about posts or taxonomies or nothing?
Taxonomies contains just categories, or?
No, taxonomies contain taxonomies.
Right, but in WordPress, it's defined as a taxonomy.
Yes, so taxonomy is a type of grouping. So categories and tags are the two basic types of taxonomies that WordPress allows you to register. The only difference being whether or not you're allowed to choose a parent. So tags, if you think about it, tags, you can't choose a parent, right? It's just a tag, like you create one and that's it. It's right there. Whereas categories actually have structure, kind of like the dinosaurs diagram, where one thing can live underneath the other, and so they'll be related to each other. And you can create your own tag or category, I guess is what they call them in the WordPress codex. And those are all taxonomies. Any other questions? Anything you didn't understand? Anything you want to know more about? No? Nothing? You know everything about posts and taxonomies now?
Well, one thing I've been reading up on a little bit recently is the speeding of term meta. I get it. You know, probably 8%. I'm wondering if you wanted to try to explain that a little more down how, because I feel like the way that they're doing them, if you hadn't like term meta across multiple post types, but now segmenting those into separate database.
Yes, and that's not out yet.
Yeah.
But when we talk about, did I already talk about it? I don't know. Now you're really going to be sick. There we go. So not much different than post meta is they're trying to pull away the infinite attribute model of posts and do the same thing for taxonomy. So that there's not a limited, so that there's like, if you've ever tried to create icons for your categories, there's no straightforward right way to do it because the database isn't set up for that, and they're trying to fix that in the schema, is all they're trying to do. Do you have anything to add, Chris?
There's been a lot of plugins, like WooCommerce has one where they support a method of adding meta of categories. So if you want, like with post meta, you can like store infinite number of data about your post, but they're trying to do the same thing with products. So like in WooCommerce, you can have a category that a product exists in, but people want to be able to add endless amounts of data about that category. Whereas with WordPress, the core only supports right now a description and a name and a relationship with another category. And term meta is also going to end up supporting the ability to add, like you said, this infinite number of data points about even just a category.
So it's custom fields for your categories.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Sorry, I don't have any way to skip these. This is the review. Okay. So the next thing that you need to know is that if you want your own custom post type, you have to register it in the code, which means, well, while there are plugins that do this for you, this presentation is about the developer way, so we're not going to talk about that. The default registrations, let's talk about that for a minute. So the default registrations, and WordPress registers its post types just like we do, right? Our custom post types, they register more or less the same way that we do. So they register posts, pages, attachments, revisions, and nav menu items. So if you ever create a post and then you save 12 drafts and it remembers 5 of the last 12 drafts in history, those are actually a completely separate post type. So when you're moving between your revisions, those aren't just posts. They're actually a completely separate entity. The nav menu item that moved somewhere at the end of the 3.x WordPress releases, they moved nav menu items out of their own table and into a custom post type. Attachments is for your media for the most part. And so when you click on the media tab in the left-hand side where you upload all your pictures, those are actually custom post types as well. You can see why they really shouldn't be called custom post types now. They're really just content types. And I think someday we will move to that naming, but not now. Not until somebody's brave enough to recommend it. So this is where it gets a little more complicated. This is a snippet of code that you definitely can't read. Nope. It's gonna let me. It's not. Plus sign. I think I'd figure this out before the presentation. Can you guys read any of that?
Yeah.
Yes. So this is, I use this. So this is definitely how I register my custom post types. I split out my labels early because you're going to include them in the middle of your registration here. You have a name and a singular name because you might have dinosaur, you might create a dinosaur, but when you're listing them, they're dinosaurs. And so it needs to know the difference because plural isn't always just an S at the end. The other thing that you're going to note in here, as Dallin said, pushing you to the edge of your development experience, is I do something here called late static binding, and I'm going to show you how cool that is at the end of the presentation. It's called late static binding. Whoever asked that? Okay. So these are the arguments. There's actually more than this, but these are like kind of some of the standard things that you're going to set up when you create a custom post type. So I pass in my labels here. We set those up already. Whether or not this post type is public. So somebody give me an example of a custom post type that you don't want to show on your website.
Custom logging.
What is it?
Custom logs. Like
Logs.
log things.
Audit logs. So an audit.
Logs.
Yeah. So if you track every time somebody changes a post and who it was and what time they did it at, and then you wanted to show that as a log, that's something you wouldn't want to be. You wouldn't want somebody hitting the front end of your website and searching for Chris, and all of a sudden you see all about his audit log entries.
A real world example, discount codes.
Discount codes, yes.
So we
Publicly queryable, so you can make them public in case you want to display them like a discount code, but you can make it so that it doesn't show up when you search. So you can't search for my discount codes, but if you land on a page, it'll still show you the discount code. Show UI, this is for the admin. So if you create a custom post type and you expect to see pages, posts, and dinosaurs, you would want this to be true. If it's something more like coupons, where you probably have that inside of something else, then you'd set it to false so that it doesn't create a new navigation item in your admin area. Capability type. I don't know what the other one is. Do you?
page. What's that page?
Is it just page?
Yeah.
Wow. That's going away in the future too. But so the difference, who can tell me the difference between a post and a page? Betsy.
Pages do not have taxonomy.
There you go. By default.
By default.
Another definition.
And pages are also hierarchical, but posts aren't.
Yes. which is right here. So whether or not it's hierarchical means you're going to utilize the ability for each content type to have a parent, like a sub page, right? Has a parent page, and that's how they're connected together. Versus a post, if you think about it, can't have a parent because it's organized by date. Menu position, that one's pretty straightforward. Where do you want it in the menu? Supports, this one's kind of interesting. So these are all things that WordPress registers for you. And so if you add supports and the editor, for example, that will, when you look at your custom post type, you'll see the content editor, just like you would on a page or post. If you didn't include this in your registration, you wouldn't have that section. Not ever, like coupon codes, for example, you may not need a whole content section, right? You just need the coupon code. So you wouldn't register maybe editor for that, or thumbnail. They probably don't need those things, or even excerpt. A title and maybe a custom field for the actual discount code would be all you'd need. Here we register the title, the editor, and the thumbnail and the excerpt, just so that I can explain to you that those are some default things that you can register that WordPress does for you. The other kind of cool thing that we can talk about is that in your plugin or theme, you can actually create your own supports registration. What do they call them? They're not features.
Yes. Are there fields?
They don't call them fields either. Anyways, you can create your own. And so other plugins can support your, so if Chris created maybe they're capabilities, but if Chris created something called coupon codes, then in your plugin, if you were running his plugin at the same time, you could just say supports coupon codes, and then maybe his stuff would be inside of your custom post type. So if you build products and he built coupon codes, you guys could work together because you could support coupon codes in your products. Has archive is, again, fairly straightforward, but if you want people to be able to see when you posted these things and navigate by date in the URL, so like posts, right? Posts, you can just go to /2014 and you can see all the 2014 posts. That's because has archive is set to true. You don't want to set that to true just everywhere because you'll run into performance problems. And I think it builds some custom rewrite rules when you set that to true as well. The last part there is to actually register all of these things that we just finished setting up. Without that line of code, everything else that we just wrote there was useless. And then there's a flush rewrite rules. Does anyone know why that's important?
So your permalinks work?
So your permalinks work. Otherwise, you create your custom post type and then you go to view it the first time and it just says page not found. If that happens for you, you forgot to put that line in your custom post type function. The last one we're going to skip. That's just some debugging code that I keep in my code for sanity. All of this code is available. Great. Oh my. Well, apparently right here. So,
write that down real quick.
yeah, right. Dallin has the link to my slides. So I put this link in the slides just so that you could click on it and it do exactly what I just did there. It'll take you to the GitHub page where this is available. The whole project is also available publicly in the WordPress Phoenix group on GitHub. So that's likely an easier way to find it if you don't want to go through my presentation. All right, let's see what else we have here. Oh, no, I don't want to create a new text box. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about fields versus taxonomy. What's my time look like?
Yeah, half hour.
Okay, plenty of time. Good. So this is actually a debate that I have with a lot of developers when I co-develop stuff. is, do you create a custom field or do you create a taxonomy? And with the upcoming changes where taxonomies actually have their own custom meta too, it's only going to get more complicated, like which one you choose to use. So I wanted to kind of talk about it because you're going to have to decide this when you're creating your custom post types, and then you go to extend them. Okay, so I have my product and it has a title. Okay, obviously needs more than that. So maybe it's got a color. Now, are we going to create a custom field, or are we going to create a taxonomy? And which one do you use? Well, realistically, you could use either one. So I'm going to give you kind of an idea of how I choose for myself, but there's really no right or wrong way. It's just different ways to create the same thing. For custom fields, we have a label and a value. That's really all you have in a custom field. We looked at the database diagram. There's only 4 fields in there, right? And one of them was like ID. So there's not a whole lot to custom fields. All you get is you can call it something and you can assign it a value. That's it. You can, if you want to get crazy with it, you can store a whole bunch of stuff in that one field. It's called a serialized array. You'll see that a lot, and a lot of the plugins do it this way. Pros and cons to the serialized array. You can't search it. You can search it, but it's really poor on performance because you have to load everything that you want to search into memory, and then you have to go through all those items. So you're completely using MySQL the wrong way, which is why search is slow and bad in most WordPress products. Because people do things like store their complex values in a serialized array. Did that just like go over everyone's head? I'm starting, okay. I got some no's, that's good. So then on the other side, you have custom taxonomies. They're typically organizational. You could argue certainly that color is organizational. So it'll depend on how you use them on the front end. If you want to put all blue sweaters onto a single page, then blue might be a taxonomy, not a custom post type, right? But if you don't organize things by color, I don't in my product. I don't want everyone to see blue products. I don't know that that's useful for me or a way that I would sell them. So it's probably a custom field because I don't really organize things by blue. People might search for it by blue, but I don't know that they organize it by blue. So now type might be t-shirt. Now that sounds more like a taxonomy to me. I would want to show everyone t-shirts, and then when they click on it, I might want to show them red, green, blue, orange. Yeah, I covered my shirt. That's good. So pick one, and create yourself a user story. Like, I'm a user, I'm coming to the site, and I want to see t-shirts. Okay, that's a taxonomy. Now I need to pick my t-shirt color. Red sounds like a custom field. The user stories are really useful, and I only recently learned about how to approach a project from a user story perspective, and it's fascinating, and it's a lot better for the end user when you do it that way. So if you're more interested in user stories, find me later. Not a part of this presentation. Okay, so now that you have all of the parts of a custom post type, you would go build one yourself, right? So in your theme, you'd link out to a file from your functions file, and you'd include it. You'd add your custom post type. Maybe your custom post type is products or dinosaurs, cats, unicorns, whatever you're interested in. Or I'm going to give you an alternative, is you can come to this open source project and you can use my code. And that's the end of my slides part of the presentation. Any questions about that theory?
Yeah, I have a question on your function for registering post types. And it has to do with the plus rewrite rules. Part of that. The last thing you do right before MaybeDebug.
Okay.
The way custom post types are registered, every page load is going to run this function to register your post type. So that instance, the WordPress is not, it's not state-based. It loads every single page load and kicks up the function to register your post type.
Okay.
flushing the rewrite rules on every page load is bad for performance because it's going to rewrite those rewrite rules on every single page load. So that should be in a separate function when your plugin gets activated.
Check. Yes, I agree.
Are you taking pull requests on that Git project?
It is. It's open.
Sweet. I'll give you.
Although, if you're here in Phoenix, I could probably just put you in the WordPress Phoenix developers group.
That could work.
And you could commit it.
A pull request. I like reviews. I just noticed that, but it was something that I saw when I worked on a plugin. I had some performance issues with custom post types, and it's because the flush was happening on every page load.
Yes, that's a good point. When front end or back end, this function has to run on every page load for this custom post type to work. And we don't want to flush cache or rewrite rules or anything else for that matter.
Very important
on everything. Yeah. Good catch.
Yeah, the other thing is that function, every time you run it, it actually saves an options for database with a 301 redirect. So if you change the value for your custom post type, it will redirect, which is great.
Yes.
That means every time you hit it, it's saving that option.
Yeah.
So you
For the database.
run it into that entity.
Right.
Crazy.
Good call. Oh, I did it again. It's okay. That was the end of the slides part of the presentation anyways. Yeah, do you like the slides? Was this okay?
Good. I don't think it was a seasick issue either.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I think it was a good content base for the content too, because it showed the relations.
Yeah, that's a subway map. You can choose that as one of the defaults. So that's Prezi. It's also free, so if any of you are giving presentations, feel free to jump on there and create it. The other reason why I put them there is because I often lose my presentations. They just disappear. And because it's in Prezi, like I just Google like Seth Carstens presentations and this pops up. So I'm a little selfish. Don't lie about it. Okay, so this is my project that I put together for this presentation. It is the proof of concept custom post type to permalink to taxonomy. Yes, that is the name of the repo. Not normally do I name my repos that way, but because it was for training purposes, I made it really long so that I could find it when I was searching. Noticing a trend here. It's really a huge project. There are 4 files. One of them is my git ignore. The other is my screenshot and readme. So really, it's just the one file. And so you would take this one file and you'd place it in your plugin or theme, and then you would include it in your project, and it would register a book post type for you. Oh, look, there's the screenshot. Click on the file here. There we go. So for those of you that don't know or haven't developed a plugin before, WordPress has a function that goes and reads the first 13 lines. That may have changed, but it used to read the first 13 lines of every file in your plugins folder, and that's how it figures out what plugins you have. So it doesn't really matter what you name the file or where exactly you put it, as long as you have these like 13 lines of commented code. It's going to go and read them and put them on your plugins page for you so you can activate it. I won't go into any of those into detail. Hopefully most of you know what that is. I will highlight lines 13 and 14. My good friend Andy, who's hopefully watching this, Andy, helped me put together this thing called Github Updater. And it's a plugin for WordPress that lets you keep track of versions of your own code that you host on GitHub. It can be private or public, but if you decide that you don't want to host your code on WordPress.org and you want something a little more Git-oriented instead of SVN, this plugin's for you. So what this does is it goes out to GitHub, and every time you tag your code, it figures out that you have a new version, and if the version is higher than the version that you have installed on the site, that adds an update button. You click it, and your code is updated. This is especially helpful if you create plugins that lots of clients use. Otherwise, you have to go to all those client sites and manually update all of your code. that you certainly didn't convince WordPress.org to host for you. 16 through 19 is actually PHP doc, so those are not required or part of WordPress at all. PHP doc is like an automated way to create documentation for your project. If you haven't checked it out, certainly Google PHP doc and read about it. It's really cool stuff.
Your dependencies PHP 5.5 is a three-way static binding.
It is. The most recent issue that I ran into is most newer developers are using brackets instead of the array function to create their arrays, which immediately pushes them through PHP 5.4. I tried installing a bunch of plugins recently on my old WP Engine installs, and half of them don't work because people are creating arrays using shorthand now. Hey, look, I do it too. So that right there is enough that would now require PHP 5.5. Okay, so this is my custom post type. It's in a class. Hence the name of my presentation is classifying your custom post types, right? The taxonomy, or the codex, codex.wordpress.org, shows you examples of just throwing functions into WordPress. And it's a really bad practice. And so we're going to use a class to register our custom post type.
Why is it really bad? And what do you mean by throwing them into, like, any functions file?
Yeah, so let's say I created a function called Seth, and it just prints out Carstens because that's my last name. And then Chris creates this Seth creates a function in his plugin called Seth, and it's supposed to print out Howl. Well, you activate them both at the same time, and your website crashes because they both use the same namespace. When you use a class, your namespaces are all separated out. So my class would be called Seth Carstens, and his would be called Seth Howl, and we can both have a function called Seth, and they don't run into each other anymore. So if everyone programmed this way, nobody's plugins would run into each other.
What if you both had what if your classes were named the same? Would that be a problem?
That would be a problem. And there's another layer of namespacing that I don't cover here, but you could use that as well. It's actual namespacing. It's called namespacing. But it's really, really ugly, which is why I don't use it. It's the designer in me. So I do some cool stuff here that allows you to override the custom post type information at the top. See if there's anything worth noting in here. So I have a MaybeDebug function that I put in a lot of my code. So if you ever see MaybeDebug, it's probably mine. But it's a way for me to debug, well, what's the best way? I cowboy code a lot. So when you do that, you have to have a way to debug your code without breaking the website, and that's the best way to do it.
So if we were to use this code, then we would need the MaybeDebug function. That's your function you wrote?
Right, yes. Okay. And it's in here.
I know it is in there.
Yeah, so this is actually self MaybeDebug, so it's going to use my class's debug function. And then if I looked through, most of the time it's just debug equals true as a parameter in the URL, spits something out useful on the page for you. That's really all that it's for. Because if any front-end users are coming to your site and putting that up there, then they should be smart enough also to expect your website to spit out some weird stuff. William and I were talking a little bit about scope. So let me just go over that real quick. These actions right here, they say init. So init is when WordPress finishes loading its core files. And during that time, we're going to create our taxonomy and our custom post type so that it's immediately available to all other theme and plugin files. So that's kind of important. And then there's a filter here for the post type link, and that just deals with permalinks. Let's see, what time is it now? What is it?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay.
We'll do some Q&A too.
I did that along the way. That's right. I'll give you my 1-minute dissertation on custom post types and permalinks. So if you ever created your own custom post types, and then you try to deploy and use them, the permalink structure actually kind of sucks, like the default one. Things don't relate like they do in real life. And it creates an awkward like URL user experience, which is also bad for SEO, because if in Google, if you have a nested subpage, so that's where you have like mysite.com/book/chapter/1. Let's say that's the URL. But book/chapter doesn't give you a page that's 404, or even just /book gives you 404. Google's like, well, I don't know what to do. And it stops surfing your site, or it stops surfing that part of your site because it just assumes that it's broken. And custom post types like to break that kind of stuff. Because you might go to /books/chapter/1 because that's how the custom post type set it up, but it may not make sense to go to /books/chapter1 for the book. It would make more sense to go to book/chapter, and so that causes irritation, right? Like, again, Google doesn't like it. Your user experience is poor because you have to name things differently, and so we experienced this at FanSided, and we had to do a custom rewrite rule somewhere in here, but it happens on this line. This is the line that causes that rewrite rule to happen, and that's why it's there. And this is actually one of the main reasons I started custom programming custom post types again, because there's lots of plugins out there that'll create custom post types for you, but none of them will fix your permalink rules properly. Except maybe WooCommerce. Although it's not a custom post type generator, it does generate a custom post type for you. Okay, let's go down here to the bottom. So that function creates a custom post type. This is the one where he explained that this is awful.
I never said awful.
No, you said awful.
You're gonna submit that fix it, right?
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
He's doing it right now.
I know.
This function, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it's what creates the proper permalinks for us. It's semi-complicated, so if you get in there and you have questions, feel free to contact me. This is the proper place for flush rewrite rules. Apparently, I just need to remove it from the other place. So on activate of this plugin, it will flush the rewrite rules for you after it creates custom post types. Apparently, it's just I need to remove some code. There's my MaybeDebug function. Hey, look, request debug, just like I said. So if you put debug equals true in your URL, it's going to give you some important information that I thought you needed to know about your custom post types if they're not working the way that you're expecting. It's going to print out some cool stuff. A lot of dashes, the class name, the function that you're in, and the custom post type. There's our activation and deactivation, so do something smart when you turn the plugin on and off. Again, with classifying your plugin, you have to instantiate a new custom post type class, which I do in this line. And this is the kind of cool part that I promised you. So because I use late static binding and everything, no, it won't go up any higher than that. I created a second custom post type in the same file with 5 lines of code. So this right here is a completely separate custom post type with all of the same attributes as the above custom post type, but I did it with 3 lines instead of all of the rest. And this is why object-oriented programming is so important, because without it and without thinking about it this way, you wouldn't be able to do this. So that converts it from, let's see what it was up here, sorry, for the scroll. So this is an event custom post type. So I lied, the books is actually the second custom post type. So this is creating events for an event venue. And then let's say the event venue is for books signing, because that would make the most sense. I create my second custom post type down here, which is for the books that would be at the event. And then you take these, again, registration and activation hooks to do something smart when you turn it on and off. And then you allow books to be created here at the end. Now I'll take questions. Mark.
Okay, what was the benefit of doing that? Why extend, is there any functions that you would need to overwrite there? Because why would you extend it if you could literally just build individual instances of the CPT, and then in your plugins somewhere else, you could just call a new one every single time you want and pass arguments to constructor instead of extending it? Is there any benefit to the way? You could still extend it both ways, but this way, if you want a new one, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. So the first reason is because I wanted most of my functions here to be static, because I don't believe in the singleton model. So the singleton model says that you can only register this class once, and then when you go to register it again, it basically says, no, 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 I see one of those in memory. We're just going to use the same class again. And it does make sense to do that because, for example, you don't want a plugin to load twice ever, or you're going to crash your website, or you don't want your theme to ever load itself twice, right? So I understand why it makes sense. There are just reasons why not to use the singleton model. And so I use a late static binding model instead that lets you come back in. And because all my functions are static, it doesn't matter like if you call it again. You're going to create another custom post type if you call it again, but you're not going to break anything because it's static. So it doesn't rely on information that's stored in the class. The reason why I did, instead of just, well, I did basically what you said. All I did here was I created books and chapters based on the custom post type permalink taxonomy. And I guess the reason why that's important is just because you could create yourself a boilerplate custom post type class. That's not what I did here, but that's what you can do so that you don't have to remember like, oh, wait, what are the labels again? And what's the other, hierarchical? Yeah, I need to add that into my attribute. You wouldn't need any of that because it would just look like this, right? Like all your variables would just be in one place. It would extend your boilerplate and you could create custom post types from that. And then you could create all your custom stuff obviously inside of here, since just renaming the custom post type to book and chapter and chapters if you're going to link by. The other thing this does right here that you kind of don't see, but it because of the parent-child relationship, you've adopted the custom rewrite rules that I wrote in the top class. You've adopted that in this class, so that chapters is now your permalink structure, right? It's not /books/ my book / chapter / like that custom permalink structure that we built up in the boilerplate. It now applies to your books and chapters. The importance of what they call late static binding is what lets us do this, right? Because normally static variables are static, i.e. you can't change them. And late static binding, which came out in PHP 5.5, says, okay, we get it. You want to extend something else, so we'll let you set these variables up. And if you don't, then they'll be static to what they used to be. Parent-child relationship. So if I didn't define link by chapters, it would define it as what we have in the parent here, events. And it would be static. You can't change it after that. But when it's creating the class, it's letting me pretend like they're not static for that millisecond while it's creating it so that I can create a new one for this exact purpose. This is what late static binding is for. Same thing with the functions. So these are, I guess that's a different conversation about when to use static functions and when not to use static functions, but kind of goes in the singleton model. And if you all are really interested in late static binding, I can come up with a whole presentation for that in 6 months and come back out. Any other questions? No, we're set? Good, I answered them all along the way. Well, thank you. Hope you learned something. Unfortunately, I didn't get to the, I had a Vagrant installed and I was gonna like launch the plugin for you